I think we can start, so we don't, yeah, we will be on time. So I don't know how many webinar we already did, but this is the one with Viviana and Thomas speaking. So let me introduce the first talk, which is Viviana's talk. She will talk about development of a virtual articulation therapy. And you can go, Viviana, with your talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Good afternoon to all the participants, and thanks for joining me this afternoon in the presentation of part of my research. My name is Viviana, I'm biomedical engineer, and I have the honor to be one of the TAPAS members. I work in the Rehabilitation Center for Communication Disorders at the University Hospital of Antwerp as part of this great project that is Horizon 2020, Maria Curie, and under the supervision of my mentors, Professor Marc Devot and Professor Wen van Nuffelen. Thanks always for your guidance and support. Today, I would like to talk about the development of the virtual articulation therapy for patients with dysarthria. Dysarthria refers to a group of motor speech disorders due to neurological damage causing weakness, slowness, and incoordination in the muscles involved in speech, leading to reductions in intelligibility and naturalness of speech, which may have a significant psychosocial impact on the person affected with this speech disorder. And the question would be, why articulation therapy for them? Well, there are 7 types of dysarthria identified and described in literature, and they all have distinctive physical and perceptual attributes. However, imprecise speech sound articulation is evident in each type of dysarthria, being considered as a perceptual hallmark of this disorder. Also, previous results of the research conducted by Professor Devot and colleagues showed that within all the dimensions that contributes to speech intelligibility, articulation has a major impact. Therefore, improving articulatory skills is often a major goal of treatment for patients with dysarthria. Now, the question would be, which type of articulation therapy for them? Well, all behavioral treatments of articulation are important, and they will be selected according to the needs of each patient. But in general, they can either involve direct or indirect approaches. Indirect approaches, such as speaking louder or slower, have been carefully investigated and are generally appreciated for their almost immediate effects on articulation and intelligibility. However, this approach intends to compensate for the impairment instead of reducing it. On the other hand, direct articulation therapy at the segmental level of speech may contribute to exploit and develop all available residual motor skills, but there is limited evidence on the short-term effect of this therapy approach, which leads to our first research topic that was to investigate the effects of a short-term boost articulation therapy on speech intelligibility. There are also other needs for improving articulation. The speech rehabilitation, in order to be effective and according to the principles of motor learning, demands intensive treatments, repetitive practice, and a lot of feedback. However, the current treatments are mainly limited in time to the interactive sessions with the speech and language therapist. Automatic systems would overcome this limitation of time, and even if they are not entirely new, the systems addressing the needs of individuals with dysarthria are rather scarce. This led us to the design and development of a virtual articulation therapy program, a computer-based therapy approach that offers patients the opportunity to practice more intensively and frequently to reduce the number of fatiguing and time-consuming transfers to the rehabilitation center and to have access to speech therapy in the comfort of their home environment. Well, we will be addressing some research questions on the topic today, and we will start seeing what is the feasibility and effectiveness of an intensive articulation therapy in patients with chronic dysarthria, which modifications in existing algorithms are necessary for precise and reliable phonological error detection, which models can objectively measure phoneme distortion from a specific target speech sounds, and what is the feasibility of developing a virtual articulation therapy with an appropriate feedback system, that sufficiently support the patient while exercising, stimulating progression and continuation. Our first research question was answered within a study that consists of two group pre-post test design to assess speech intelligibility on 5 different speech tasks. A total of 17 Dutch-speaking subjects with mild to severe dysarthria participate in the study. They receive intensive articulation therapy, 5 sessions of 45 minutes during 1 week. After that, perceptual and acoustic analysis were performed. Main results of this study can be observed in the graphs, where we see there is a statistically significant increase of mean group intelligibility in several speech tasks. As an illustration, we only show here the increase at phoneme level, but there are others like at sentence level and in automatic sequences. This result was supported by the acoustic analysis that revealed a reduction in formal centralization ratio. The lower the values of formal centralization are, the result of a wider range of articulatory movements and precise positions of the articulation during speech. In the last graph, we can observe that within specific group of severity, that's it, mild, moderate, and severe dysarthria, positive effects of the boost articulation therapy were demonstrated for all of them. So we can conclude from this study that the boost articulation therapy successfully improved speech intelligibility in patients with dysarthria at different levels of the impairment. Now that we know the positive effects of the therapy on intelligibility, we move forward to the development of the virtual therapies. For that, several steps are required, but the first we needed was an algorithm capable to detect phonological errors during speech production for giving feedback to the patients. So we select an algorithm developed by our colleagues from the University of Erlangen, which have shown positive results in similar tasks. It is based on recurrent neural networks and it's freely available online to be used by the research community. The the virtual therapies, I will say the VAT sometimes, it's at present specifically designed for Dutch speakers. So, and this algorithm that we select was trained on the Spanish language, and with a different number of phonological features were detected that did not fit the need for our purpose. So modifications were necessary for our own goals. The system was retrained using Dutch specific phonological characteristics and using the corpus spoken Dutch. And at the end, after the system being retrained, was able to detect 15 phonological features plus pause or stop from the speech signal, which are believed sufficient for analyzing the Dutch consonants. The current performance of the model showed good accuracies for all of the phonological classes, and the figure at the right shows a visual representation of the system output used as feedback on production. As we train the model on healthy speech, once we use it on pathological speech, the result will reveal possible articulation errors. From this study, we can conclude that the algorithm performance for phonological error detection is accurate and contributes to adequate feedback of utterance production, offering detailed information to detect and so difficult to detect and quantify by the human ear. But we also want to go a little bit further, analyzing the possibility of adding another type of feedback based on result. And for that, we focus on the degree of distortion in the production of individual speech sounds. And why degree of distortion? Well, within the different articulatory errors in dysarthria, speech sound distortion is the most predominant, and we believe it is related to deviations in the production of one or more sound-specific characteristics. Within this study, we analyzed the possibility of an objective score of phoneme distortion for a specific target sound. 35 participants with mild to severe dysarthria participate in the study. Around 12,400 words were analyzed. The speech samples were perceptually judged by 3 experts that score specific target sounds with a visual, with a visual analog scale from and from the acoustic signal we have two different feature sets to analyze. The first feature set was to calculate the mean of the phonological posterior of all the phonological classes upon the manually segmented target phoneme, and we end up with a vector of 15 phonological features. And for the second feature set, we calculate the phonological log likelihood ratio of each phonological posterior, and then the mean of those phonological ratios, and we also end up with the vector of 15 features per phoneme. A multiple regression analysis and also a classification analysis on the collected data were performed. And for the classification analysis, we use an ensemble classifier, and we divide the data in 4 categories, from no distortion to severe distortion. And we use augmented data to have more balanced categories. The multiple regression analysis for each target phoneme independently did not show very accurate results. For mainly all the cases, the R square and the adjusted R square values are mostly lower than 0.5, indicating a weak correlation between perceptual and predicted values. But on the other hand, the results of the classification analysis show an accuracy of 71% with the first feature set and 74% with the second feature set. The model may need further improvements to get higher levels of accuracy, but this was the first step towards an automatic score of degree of distortion and at phoneme level. From the confusion matrix, we can observe the correct accuracy for each category, namely no distortion, light distortion, moderate distortion, and severe distortion that are around 78 and 62% of accuracy. From this study, we can conclude that classification of degree of sound distortion performs better with the phonological log likelihood ratio feature set, and we have already an appropriate response for patients, which contributes to an adequate feedback on results. Our final study focused on the implementation of the virtual articulation therapy, which provides an extensive and well-structured package of exercises with visual and auditory modeling of the target phonemes and adequate feedback on utterance, on the production of the utterance. The tool incorporates only one of the automated methods to detect phonological error, because by the time of the pilot study, only feedback on production was implemented. The first feedback we saw. A total of 14 participants with dysarthria evaluate the acceptability, usability, and user interaction with the tool based on 2 complete therapy sessions using also a self-designed questionnaire. I want to explain broadly how the BAT works. First, the patient will select the target sound that he wants to train. There is a database with the exercise and the modeling and all what they need to follow. Second, then the instructions will be given on the correct production, so like the model of the correct production of the specific target sound that he wants to train. I want to show an example.
Tijdens de volgende oefeningen focussen we op de klank b, zoals in bot, kabel. Bot, kabel. Plaats beide lippen met een beetje spanning op elkaar. Plaats de tongpunt net achter de ondertanden. Laat nu de lucht krachtig ontsnappen zonder je stem te gebruiken. Bot, kabel.
That was an example with the sound B, and after that the practice begins. The user selects the level of difficulty that he wants to train, and then he can have access to visual and auditory modeling all the time he needs it. He needs it, so the sound and the visual image. with the phonetic placement of the mouth. And once the word is produced by the patient, immediate feedback on production is given, and he can also listen to his own production again and repeat the word as much as he wants or if needed. Results on the applied questionnaire show that in general, participants were positive about the new virtual articulation therapy approach. The results indicate that the visual articulation therapy has a user-friendly interface that can be used independently, which is important for them. For patients with dysarthria, recommendations were given by the users to further optimize the program and to ensure user engagement. And from this study, we can conclude that the initial implementation of an automatic boost articulation therapy is feasible and well accepted by end users. The tool is an appropriate solution to increase the frequency and intensity for reaching better outcomes of articulation training that supports traditional methods, and they can use it independently in the comfort of their home. Summarizing what has been done in this research, we have a development of the boost articulation therapy, a unique, well-structured therapy program for intensive direct articulation therapy based on the principles of motor learning. The boost articulation therapy shows to be feasible and well tolerated by patients. Both perceptual and objective outcome measures show positive results. The boost therapy significantly improved speech intelligibility in patients with chronic and progressive dysarthria at different levels of the impairment. We show the accuracy of the Dutch-specific phonological error detection algorithm. We also have a first implementation or a first approach to model that objectively classify phoneme distortion for specific target sounds. We tried to give also like a first implementation of a patient-friendly interface for the virtual therapist, and the newly developed virtual therapies provide a set of exercise, visual, auditory modeling, and adequate feedback with accurate performance. The visual feedback within the virtual therapies was found to be attractive, clear, and easy to interpret. Thanks for your attention. And if you have any question or doubt, please.
Thank you, Viviana. Are there any questions for her? When you are using Phonet, did you, I didn't get if you were transferring something to be able to go from the Spanish Colombian learning to Dutch?
No, we did not use transfer learning. We trained the models from the beginning with the corpus gesproken Netherlands, that is a mix of Dutch and Flemish corpus of healthy speech.
Okay. Wei, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for interesting, nice presentation. I have a pretty general question. I'm curious about if you compare this virtual assistant therapy with a true human therapist, how's the improvements in the patient's speech sound, and whether they found this one is more portable, like they can do the exercise every day when comparing with the therapist?
That's thank you, Wade. That's a very interesting question, and we also are wondering what will happen. That's our next study. We want to see if also with a pre-post test design, we want to evaluate if the patients are using only or for a period of time using the virtual therapist will have the same results as a normal therapy. So that's something that is in the to-do list. And
Okay.
But yes, for the moment, at least they can use it, and that supports anyway the the traditional therapy. So they can still go to the center, to the hospital or any other rehabilitation center, and they can meanwhile use it in their home. So the results are or will be a little bit mixed, but once they only use the virtual therapist, we could also analyze if the improvements are the same. Yeah, that's a question for future research. Thank you.
Looking forward to the future
we are
results.
also. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Pascal, do you have a question?
Yeah, very brief follow-up maybe on that. So is it planned to put this into production somehow or make it available to the broad public, or is it like for the hospital where you did the research only available currently?
I think it's meant to be publicly available. It's not at present, so only the hospital has it now. We are still refining some things. We want to incorporate also the degree of distortion score. And we are also trying to add some more live feedback, like an applause or more something to say good job, or so more feedback that they can feel more enthusiastic and willingly to continue. So we are doing the final refinements, and after that, yes, I think it will be available online or freely.
Very cool, yeah, thanks.
Thomas?
Yeah, hi. Viviana, thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering when you showed the example of the video with the pronunciation of certain sounds, like for instance, the B and so on. Did you check whether people have more problems with phonemes or sounds that were not visible? Like, I don't know, for instance, some fricative sounds that you have to put your tongue back in your mouth, but you can actually, you don't see that, you just hear the sound. So I was wondering whether you analyze that kind of stuff as well.
Well, the score of distortion was perceptually by the speech therapist. They did not give accurate information, like I don't too many samples to analyze, so they could not say like I don't hear the fricative with this or with that. It's just a perception of how precise was, so we don't have exactly that information that what was wrong in each sound. So no, unfortunately, it's just the perceptual.
And did the Phonet tool show something, or it was kind of like same for different phonological classes, like plosive or I don't know, fricative? Was it the same, or was there any class that was better than the others for classification?
Yeah. Yes, for regression, you mean?
Right. Yeah, regression.
Yeah. For the regression, we had some phonemes that are better perceived, yeah, but no, predicted. Sorry, better predicted. We have some of them that are better predicted, but I can go back. Yeah, like for instance, the R score here, it's high, like 0.6 for this sound, like it's sound. Also quite good for S, for sh, for V. So yeah, individually we have some good perception, but when we combine them, there is no a good correlation anymore. So I think it's too many it's 21 different target sounds, and yeah, what is wrong with each and what the specialists perceive in each one. So that's a little bit more difficult. I only use 15 features, as I mentioned. So the mean of each phonological class, but maybe in the future we will need to add some more features. So another type of features that can improve the performance. But yeah, that's something to continue investigating and improving, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the questions, and thank you, Viviana, for your interesting talk. And now we will have the presentation of Thomas.
Right. And I was actually asking because I have some, I mean, it's not the same, but it kind of goes into the same direction. So let me just share. Give me a second. Whoops. Right. So I guess you can see the complete stream now.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Oh,
So
sorry, I will put.
I will start. So for the ones that don't know me, my name is Tomás Arias. I was part of the TAPAS project until last year. I was under the supervision of Professor Maria Schuster, and I was working as part of the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. Currently, I'm just waiting for the date of my defense. So today I'm just going to talk about part of the work that I did during my PhD. And this is the automatic analysis of speech production of cochlear implant users. So let's just start first with a short description for the ones that don't know. A cochlear implant is a biomedical device that helps people with profound or severe hearing loss to hear. So it basically consists of a microphone and a speech processor that picks the audio signals, then it picks the audio signals and convert this into electrical pulses. Then a transmitter send the pulses to a receiver, which is inside the skin of the patient. And this receiver send the pulses to an array of electrode, which is implanted inside the cochlea of the patient. But then why does it, or how does the speech of the people get affected by it? So in typical hearing, the audio sounds just go through the ear canal and it makes the eardrums to vibrate. And these bones here in the middle ear push a fluid that is inside the cochlea back and forth. The cochlea functions as a spectral analyzer, and the hair cells inside the cochlea convert this mechanical movement of fluid into electrical signals that are then picked up by the auditory nerves. And then the signals are sent to the brain, and then we hear. But with the cochlear implant, the implant just bypasses the damages part of the ear, and the electrodes directly stimulates the auditory nerves. And this is necessary in cases, for instance, when there are no hair cells due to some infection or some malformation problem. So how does a person with cochlear implant hear? Here I have an example. Let's hear first a original recording.
The sun is shining.
I don't know if you could hear that. I hope you did.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so, and this is the example of a person with a cochlear implant.
The sun is shining.
So if you notice, it sounds kind of muffled, like someone is talking through a wall. And if you hear this your whole life or for a long time, it might be the case that your speech will adapt to these kind of new sounds that you hear. And those, there are going to appear different speech problems. So the aim of my project was to implement speech technology for automatic assessment of the speech production of the quality of cochlear implant users. And for this, I explore different speech dimensions. So at the phonemic level, prosody, and articulation level. From there, I also analyzed where was or which one were the most suitable features to detect these changes or speech production problems. And finally, I also work on some applications to implement these methods for assessment of speech of cochlear implant users. So as for the methods, Viviana already talked a little bit about this. For phonemic analysis, I use the phoneme posterior probabilities, which is basically to convert a speech signal into a sequence of phoneme posterior probabilities, where each one of these elements of the sequence represents the probability of occurrence of a certain phoneme class. In my work, I use three different dimensions, namely the manner, place of articulation, and the voicing. As a reminder, the manner of articulation means like the way you set the articulators to produce certain sounds. So for instance, in the example here for nasal sounds, there is an obstruction in the vocal tract at some point, but there is also air coming through the nose, and then you have the production of the sound. In the case of place of articulation, again, for the nasal sound M, the place of obstruction happens at the lip, for instance, and for the plosive sound P, there is also an obstruction in the same place. So place of articulation is just the point where there is an obstruction of the air coming from the lungs. And finally, voicing refers to whether the sound was produced with vibration of the vocal folds or not. And due to time limitations, I'm just going to talk about the place of articulation. So this is the general architecture of the network I use for phoneme recognition. It's basically a combination of convolutional layers and recurrent layers. And the input tensors of the network are MEL spectrograms with speech segments of 500 milliseconds, and the phoneme posterior probabilities are computed with a sigmoid activation function. As you saw, there are certain phonemes that can be belong to different classes. For instance, for manner, for the M, it can belong to the labial for the nasal sounds, but also can belong to the labial kind of sounds and can also belong to the voicing sound. So this is a multi-label network, and the probabilities are computed with the sigmoid activation function. I also consider different prosody parameters, so pitch, loudness, and different duration features, such as the duration of the voice segments, duration of the pauses, and also number of voice and pauses per second. And additionally, I also consider some rhythm-based features, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. And also I consider acoustic articulation analysis, and for this I took the transition from voiceless to voice sounds or onset transitions, and from voice to voiceless sounds or offset transitions. In this case, the transitions were used to model difficulties or detect difficulties of the speaker to start or stop, vibration of the vocal folds. For characterization, I just use filter band features such as MEL and gamma tone frequency Kepler coefficients to encode the information in the time frequency representation. I performed two main experiments considering these dimensions, speed dimensions. One is to investigate the influence of the onset and the duration of deafness in phoneme precision. So the main objectives of the aim of this experiment was to first evaluate the phoneme precision of the cochlear implant users. We also wanted to quantify these errors. And for this, we use the phoneme posterior probabilities. But also we wanted to investigate whether the point where people lost their hearing, so before or after a spoken language acquisition, had an influence in this production of phonemes, and also whether the duration of deafness has an influence. So in the figure, we see the general methodology implemented in these experiments. I used the pre-trained neural network that I showed before. And then I just used the cochlear implant and controlled speech data to compute the phoneme posterior probabilities. As for the data, all of the recordings considered were recordings from German native speakers. All of them were asked to read 97 words, which contain different phonemes of the German language in different positions within words. And basically, I have four different classes. One class for control, which is people without any hearing or speech problems. And for the cochlear implant, I have three different classes. The prelingual means people that lost their hearing before spoken language acquisition. And postlingual means people that lost their hearing after language acquisition. And for the postlinguals, I also consider two different classes. One for people that had a relatively short duration of deafness, so the time between deafness and the surgery to get the device was relatively short, less than 2 years, and people with a long duration of deafness, so people that spend more than 2 years without the implant. So here we see the results first for the onset of deafness, so whether it was before or after a spoken language acquisition. In the radar plot, we see the maximum phoneme posterior for the place of articulation classes. The black lines represent the controls, the blue ones, the people that lost their hearing after a spoken language acquisition, and the gray people before spoken language acquisition. So here we can see that the main differences regarding the place of articulation, the production of the sounds, is on the non-visible phonemes. So non-visible because, I mean, we saw an example before in Viviana's presentation. And this is what I was kind of asking, because in my case, it seems that when you don't actually see what the speech articulator are doing, people will have more problems to learn how to pronounce the sounds correctly. And this is quite surprising also for people that lost their hearing after a speech acquisition, because they already have some language model developing in their head and the speech is supposed to be okay. But it seems like because of the maybe low resolution of the cochlear implant, you get to adapt your speech to a new frequency range. Also, we can observe that the difference between people prelingual and postlingual cochlear implant users is more evident in the post-alveolar class. And one explanation for this is we can see here in this example. On this side, we have the time signal posterior probability for post-alveolar and a spectrogram of a control speaker. And on the right, we can see one for a prelingual cochlear implant users. So the two of them say the German word Spinne.
Spinne.
And then for the cochlear implant.
Spinne.
You probably didn't hear the difference, but if we see the posterior probability, we can see that for the prelingual is way lower than the healthy control, even though I'm pretty sure everyone understood the same word from the two speakers. And if we see the spectrogram, we can actually see that this kind of phonemes are harder to produce, and this is reflected in the lower, let's say, energy in the spectrum compared with respect to the healthy control. So it seems like the low frequency resolution of the cochlear implant might affect also the speech production. And now for investigation of the duration of deafness and influencing phoneme precision. In dark blue, we can see the people or cochlear implants with a short duration of deafness, and light blue is the people with a long duration. So, I mean, this result might appear to be obvious, but I was not expecting to see a little bit of difference even between the two classes, because in this case, these two groups of cochlear implants, they learn how to speak, but it seems like the amount of time that they spend without the implant actually modify the way they speak or the way they produce certain phonemes. And again, this is more evident for the post-alveolar class. The other experiment that I performed was analysis of acoustic features, but on connected speech. So in this case, I consider the phoneme precision, which we already talked before, but also prosody and articulation features. As for the data, again, I have recordings of German native speakers. All of them were asked to read a text called The North Wind and the Sun. If you don't know it, it's a text that is quite standard for analysis of pathological speech signals. And in the table, we can see the number of speakers on each class and the distribution of age for each one of the classes. So the two classes are more or less balanced regarding these two factors. And this is important, especially for the analysis of prosody, of course. And only postlingually cochlear implant users were considered in this part. So first, for the phoneme precision, we can observe that contrary to the results that I showed previously, we can also see differences in the labial and alveolar classes, which should be the most visible ones. And this is expected, of course, because when they are reading, at least, or when we are reading, we don't have that much time to process the text that is going to be displayed to us in a screen or so. So it was expected that they will make more mistakes in this task, but it is still kind of surprising that even for the visual phonemes, there is a difference that we can see with respect to healthy controls. As for the prosody analysis, I compute several parameters. Here, I'm just going to talk about some standard ones. So the first one is the pitch, the average pitch for male and females. In this case, there is not much of a difference in either class. There is only, it seems like for the male cochlear implants, the pitch is a little bit higher than the male controls, but there is no such a difference between the females. Similarly, for the loudness, again, male cochlear implant users have a little bit higher loudness than the controls, but there is almost no difference between the females. Another parameter for prosody analysis is the voice ratio, which is the number of voice segments per second. And in this case, we do actually see that healthy controls have a higher number of voice segments per second than the cochlear implants And this feature might be related to the speaking rate, especially because everyone read the same text. So it might be associated on how fast they read the text. And the other feature that I consider was the vowel timing, which is Some people say it's related to rhythm, and it's basically the variability in the duration of consecutive vowels. So the higher the vowel timing, the higher is going to be the variability on vowels, and that's exactly what we see here in the box plot. And finally, for the articulation analysis, I consider the transitions, but because the filter bank features are a little bit hard to interpret, I just perform automatic classification. And as we can see on the table, it was kind of similar for onset, offset, and the combination of the transitions. And this result basically means that the transitions are, of course, useful to detect these changes, but it has to it is necessary to explore a way to have interpretable results. And finally, I work also on the supervision of some applications. The first one called Zeta, which is an Android-based application to evaluate hearing and speaking capabilities of cochlear implant user. It has exercises for hearing, for instance, minimal pairs, where sound is reproduced through the loudspeakers, and the user has to choose the word that they think they hear, and also gives you kind of a feedback. Another one was Cochlear, which was actually accepted for show and tell of interspeech this year, and it's a children version of Zeta. And the main difference is that the exercises are made in a game-like way, so they don't feel like they are doing a task, but rather they are playing. So in summary, yes, I found, or yes, we can observe different or differences in the speech of cochlear implant users. When we analyze different speech dimensions, the posterior probabilities show that they are suitable to quantify the level of, let's say, imprecision on phoneme production. The speech prosody on the CI users was different, especially for the rate and duration features, and articulation analysis showed that they might also have problem for starting or stopping the movement of the vocal folds. And finally, the limitation of the words are, of course, to have longitudinal data for monitoring the speech over the time, also including information about the hearing status and correlate this to the speech parameters. And what is missing from the app is just to collect data and evaluate the suitability of these smartphone applications to help on the rehabilitation process of the patients. So that was everything for me. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask me.
Thank you, Thomas, for the very interesting talk. Are there any questions? No questions for Thomas. Yeah, Wei, do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas, for interesting and very clear presentation. I don't have any detailed question, but I'm pretty surprised by the results when comparing the male and female people, whether they have difference in their the feature before the speaking rate, the pitch. Was
Yeah.
it the pitch?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about why the female people didn't show any increase in the pitch. Have you do any analysis on that?
Yeah, I mean, there is some related word, but there is not in a specific. So it seems like this might be due to a similar effect as the lumbar effect. So if you don't hear yourself clearly, you raise your voice because you want to hear yourself, right?
Yes.
Like you want to be more
Indeed.
intelligible what you say.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's more evident for male, maybe because the frequency resolution of the implant affects more the pitch or natural tone. That might be an explanation why only for male this is the case. But as I say, this is just a hypothesis. There is nothing very conclusive in the state of the art. Some people also have some similar results, nothing significant, but it is hard to tell. Maybe that would be one reason.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your explanation.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for to both speakers. And so I will put the recording on YouTube channel as always, and Benz will present his talk next week. So I hope I will see every one of you next week. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. Have a nice evening and afternoon, actually. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.